In this video, I'll show you how to take some simple shapes and use the tools in Adobe Illustrator to create this two-dimensional turkey, which can be used all throughout the fall season. I'll also show you how to turn that turkey into a line drawing, which can be used for a coloring sheet. I'm going to open up a document which I've already started, and I have set up my color palette, which I chose from the color themes. If you go up to Window and choose Color Themes, you can type in any kind of description and Illustrator will give you quite a selection of palettes. And I like to place some little rectangles on my artboard and just go ahead and put the colors there so that as I'm coloring my objects, I don't have to keep going back to the Properties panel. I'll close out of this. I also have just a little sample of our turkey that we can refer to as we're drawing. Over in the Layers panel, I want you to notice that I've already created a number of layers where I'll be placing the different parts of my turkey, and that's going to help me to stay organized as we add piece after piece. I'll start with the back of the turkey, and I'm going to click on that layer and then get the Ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, and I'll click on the artboard to activate the ellipse dialog box. I'll type in 4 inches for the width, tab down, and I'll type in 2.5 inches for the height, and then press the return key. And I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V. I'll move this in the center, and then I'm going to get the Eyedropper tool, keyboard shortcut I, and I'll click on the CMYK color 0728738. Now I'm going to move to the body and the neck and the head layer, and I'll get the Ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, and I'll click on the artboard, and I'm going to make the front of the body 2.25, tab down, times 3, press the return key, and I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V. I'm going to center this over the first object that I drew, and then I'll get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and click on the artboard, and the neck is going to be 0.5 by 0.5. Press the return key, get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and drag this over and place it where the anchor points are just inside this oval. For the head, I'll get the Ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, press on the artboard, and my head is going to be 2 inches by 2 inches, and press the return key, get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'll drag this over, and I'm centering it, and I just want it to cover the upper 2 anchor points of that neck. Now I'll select the neck and the body as well, and I'm going to come over to the Properties panel and click on Horizontal Align Center just to make sure I have them lined up right, and then come down to the Pathfinder area, and I'm going to click on the Unite tool. Now I'll deselect this and get the Direct Selection tool, keyboard shortcut A. I want to round these corners. I'll hold down the Shift key and click on the 4 anchors that are right around the neck, and then I'm going to drag these handles to 0.3 and release my mouse. Now I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and select my turkey body and move it out of the way for a minute. And now we'll move back to the Layers panel, and we're going to work on the wings layer. So I'll get the Ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, and click on the artboard. And this time the wing is going to be 2 inches by 1/2 inch. I'll press the Enter key, and I'm going to rotate this wing. I'll get the Rotate tool, keyboard shortcut R, and I'm going to hold down my Option key and then click on the right anchor, and that's going to open up the Rotate dialog box, and whatever is typed in that dialog box is going to immediately happen to this object, but don't worry about it, because when we type in the right values, it'll change back. So I'm going to type in 20 degrees, and then I'm going to press copy. Now I have two little parts for my wings, and while this copy is selected, I'm going to duplicate that move by using the keyboard shortcut Command D. Then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and select all three of these pieces and come to the Properties panel and click the Unite Pathfinder tool. Now I'll move this out of the way as well, and I'm going to work on the feathers. Let's come back over to the Layers panel and we'll click on the feathers. Now for the feathers, I'm going to use the ellipse tool as well. I'll get that, keyboard shortcut L, and click on the artboard, and the measurement is going to be 1.75 by 3, and then I'll press the Enter key. And I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'm going to deselect this because I need to turn my grid on, and I can't have anything selected on the board for this part of the Properties panel to actually show up. So I'm going to click on this center icon, and then I'll come back over here and get my little feather, and I want to center this over one of these darker gray lines. I'll rotate this feather. I'll get the rotate tool, keyboard shortcut R, but I want to rotate it a 1/2 inch below this bottom anchor. And each one of these little rows is 1/8 of an inch. So if I count down 4 rows, that's going to be a 1/2 of an inch. I'm going to hold down the Option key first, and then I'll click, and that's going to move the rotate ball where I want it to rotate. And this time we want to rotate 30 degrees. So I'll type in 30, and I'm going to press Copy. And then while this copy is selected, I'm going to duplicate this move by using the keyboard shortcut Command D. And I'm just going to keep pressing Command D until I get all the way around the circle. Then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'm going to select the bottom 5 ovals and I'll delete them. Now I want to make a couple of changes. I'll select this second to the last one on the right, and I'll move it to the front by using the keyboard shortcut Shift Command right bracket. And then I'll select the far right one and I'll do the same thing, pressing Shift Command right bracket. Now I'm going to color my feathers, and the colors that I'm going to use are in this first left strip. So I'll select the first one and I'll get the eyedropper tool and click the first one, get the selection tool, select the second one, get the eyedropper tool, and I'm just going to go through this really fast. You can watch me make these changes. This is much faster than going in and selecting each color out of the Properties panel. Okay, that is done. Now I'll select all of my feathers, and I'm going to add a couple of offset paths here. So I'll come up to Object, Path, Offset Path, and I'm going to offset it minus 0.08 inches and click OK. When it's minus, it places the offset on the inside of the stroke. If I didn't put a minus, it would actually add the offset path to the outside. Now the offset objects are still selected. I'm going to come back to Object, down to Path, and offset one more time, and I'm going to just repeat that by pressing OK. Now then I'll select that center offset path. I'm holding down my Shift key and carefully just selecting. It's the middle line there. And then I'm going to get the eyedropper tool and come up and select the CMYK color 0, 72, 87, 38, which is the same color as the turkey. and then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V. Now I'm going to select all of the pieces in the center feather, and I'm going to raise these up with my up arrow key, and I'll just press up 10 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I'll select all of the feather pieces, and I'm going to group them together using the keyboard shortcut Command G. Then I'll click on the artboard to deselect them. All right, let's come to the layers panel, and I'm going to move our turkey and place him over these feathers. And I'm going to try to get all this centered up and place it right here. And I would use a keyboard shortcut, but it won't work on separate layers. And so I'm going to move the feather layers. They're going to go back behind the body head layer and behind the body back layer. And now I have my turkey in front, and I'm going to use the arrow key and just move it up slightly, and I think I'm going to leave him right there like that. Now let's get this wing and drag it over, and we'll put it about right here. You can play around with that and put it where you want it. Then I'm going to get the wing layer, and I'm going to move it behind the body head layer, but I want it in between that and the body back. And when I deselect, you can see what that's done there. And I think I might just move that down a little bit more. I think that looks better. All right, now I'm going to select my wing and come over to the left toolbar, and I have the rotate tool showing, but when I click and hold that down, the reflect tool is also now an option to select. That's keyboard shortcut O, and I'm going to click on that and then double click, and that opens the reflect dialog box. I'm going to leave vertical checked, but I'm going to click copy, and then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and hold down the shift key so that I can drag this copy and it stays right in line with the first wing. And I think that looks just about right there. All right, now I'm going to select the other wing, the back body, and the front body with the head, and I'm going to apply an effect. I'll come up to Effect and then Distort and Transform over and down to Roughen. And it does really look rough right now, but we're going to change that. I'm going to change the size to 0.5. I'll leave relative checked. I want the detail to be 18, and then I'll choose smooth and say OK, and I'll deselect that so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to do the same thing to the outer layer of the feathers, but I'm going to have to ungroup them first. I'll use the keyboard shortcut Shift Command G, and then I'm able to select them individually. I'll hold down the Shift key and be very careful to just get the outside edges. And then I can come up to Effect and click on Apply Roughen, and Illustrator remembers the attributes that we put in there for the turkey body and applies those. Now we're ready for the hair, and I'll click on that layer, and I'm going to get the pencil tool, keyboard shortcut N. I'm going to draw the hair in one little square, and I need to get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and come to the properties panel and remove that fill. We just want the line itself. Now I'll get the pencil tool again, keyboard shortcut N. I'll do one that's a little taller, and then one going the other direction. And then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, select all three of these pieces and come to the properties panel and click on the word stroke. And I'll come down to the profile area and twirl down and look for the width profile number 4 and select that. And then I'm going to go up and change the weight to 3 points. And you can see when I deselect this that this gives just a little added depth to the hair. I'll select the 3 hair follicles and then come over to the Properties panel and click on Vertical Align Bottom. And now I'm going to just select the left one and use my right arrow key and move it to the right. And then I'll select the hair on the right and use my left arrow key and move that to the left. And then I'll select all 3 of these pieces and I'm going to group them together using the keyboard shortcut Command G. Now let's come to the Layers panel. I want the hair to be behind the head, and so I'm just going to drag that layer down behind the body head layer. And then when I come over and drag this onto the turkey, it's right where I want it to be. Now we'll move to the eyes layer, and I'm going to get the ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, and click on the artboard. And my eyes are going to be 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, and I'll press the return key. And I'm going to get the Eyedropper Tool, and that's keyboard shortcut I, and I'll click on the white color, and then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and hold down the Shift and the Option keys, and I'm going to drag a copy, and I don't want it to come all the way to an intersection. I want it to overlap just a little bit, and then I'll release my mouse, and I'm going to select both of these eyeballs, come to the Properties panel, and in the Pathfinder area, I'll click on the Unite tool. I'll get the Blob Brush Tool, which is keyboard shortcut Shift B, and I'm going to reduce the size of this brush. You can see the outline around the edge of the brush. I'll use the left bracket key to make that smaller. If I wanted to increase it, I would use the right bracket key. Let's drop this down, and I'm going to just click one time, and that gives me a perfect little circle for my eyes, and click another time, and then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'll select these, and I'm going to click on the vertical align center. Now I'm going to get the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and I'm going to drag out a rectangle that is covering the tops of the eyeballs, and it comes down to that first anchor point in the center. And then I'll get the Eyedropper Tool, keyboard shortcut I, and come up, and I'll click on the CMYK color 0728738. And then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, select my rectangle and the eyeballs, and I'm going to get the shape builder tool, and that's keyboard shortcut Shift M, and now I'll hold down my option key and just drag across the part I don't want. And I'll get the selection tool again, keyboard shortcut V, and I think that's going to look just fine. So I'll select the eyeballs, and I'm going to move them over and place them on the turkey. Now let's move to the eyebrows layer, and we're going to use that Blob Brush Tool again, keyboard shortcut Shift B. And the little blob is too big for the eyebrows, so I'll use the left bracket, and I'm going to press that until I get it where I want it, and then I'm just going to draw a couple of eyebrows. I don't want them to be exactly the same, so I think that'll work just fine. And then we're going to move to the beak. I'll get the pen tool, keyboard shortcut P. I'll place an anchor here at the top, and then I'm going to count down 5 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll come over 2 rows to the left, place an anchor, go straight up, anchor, and close. And then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V. Then I'll move the beak over underneath the eyeballs, and I need to get the Eyedropper Tool, keyboard shortcut I, and I'm going to use the CMYK color 04088-9. Now we're going to do the wattle. And that's this little red part of the turkey. I'll get the ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, and click on the artboard. And I'm going to type in 0.25, tab, and 0.6, enter. Then I'll get the Blob Brush Tool, keyboard shortcut Shift B, and I'll increase that brush just a little bit by using the right bracket key. And I'm going to draw up and put a little curve on this. Now I'll get the Selection Tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'll select both of these objects here, come over to the Properties panel, down to Pathfinder, and click on Unite. And then I'll get the Eyedropper Tool, keyboard shortcut I, and I'll select the CMYK color 18-192-8 and get the Selection Tool, keyboard shortcut V. Now, I think I'm going to move this layer. So let's come to the Layers panel. I want the beak to be down underneath the eyes. So I'll grab that layer and drag it into place. Then I'll get the wattle, and I'm going to just drag it over and place it on top of the beak, and I'll use the arrow keys to make sure that I have it right in place where I want it. Okay, we're ready for the bib, and for the bib we're going to use the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M, and I'll click on the artboard, and I'm going to type in 1.5 by 2 and press enter. I'll get the Eyedropper Tool, keyboard shortcut I, and click on the white. Then I'll get the Ellipse Tool, keyboard shortcut L, click on the artboard, and I'm going to make a 1/2 inch circle and press enter. And then get the Selection Tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'm going to center this circle over the top part of the bib. And I'm going to make sure that I've done that evenly by going to the Properties panel, and I'll click on the horizontal align center. Now I'm going to get the Shape Builder tool, which is keyboard shortcut Shift M, and hold down the Option key and drag over the circle, and that gives me the neck opening for my bib. Now I'll get the Selection Tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'm going to drag the bib over and place it on my turkey. Now I want to round these top edges, and so I'll get the Direct Selection Tool, keyboard shortcut A. I'll select the top right anchor and the top left anchor, and I'm going to drag the handles down as far as they'll go, and then I'm going to deselect that to look at it, and I'm happy with that placement. I'll select my bib and come up to Object, come down to Path, over and down to Offset Path, and I'm going to have this little offset path inside here. I'm going to leave this at minus 0.08 inches and say OK. Then I'm going to come over to the word stroke, click on it again, and I'm going to check dashed line. I have 4-point dash, 4-point gap typed in. If yours are different, just highlight that and change those values, and then click on the second icon, which aligns the dashes to the corners, and then I'll click on the artboard to just close that out. I'll get the Eyedropper tool and click on that blue, and then I'll get the Selection Tool, keyboard shortcut V, and look what happened. Because I have a stroke around this color, it has actually changed the dashed line to a stroke. So I'm going to have to select this, come back over to stroke, and click on that dashed line again. And now we have our dashed line back. I'll get the Type tool, which is keyboard shortcut T. I'll open up a little text box. I'm going to come over to the Properties panel and change the font to Chaloops. If you don't have Chaloops, you can go to Adobe Fonts and activate that, and you'll be able to use this font. I'm going to change the weight to 25 points and press enter. And then I'm going to just type Eat veggies. And I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and down at the bottom of my properties panel there is a quick action, create outlines, and that has turned my text into objects, and I can just drag this over and place it right where I want it. Now we're ready to give our turkey some feet. So let's select everything, and I'm going to move him up just a little bit so we have room to add feet. Let's come to the layers panel, and I'm going to select the feet layer, and then I'll get the ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, and click on the artboard, and I'm going to type in a 1/2 inch by a 1/4 inch and press the return key, and I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'm going to rotate this little toe for his foot, and I'll get the rotate tool, keyboard shortcut R. I'll hold down the option key and then click on the right anchor, and I'm going to type in 60 degrees and press copy. Now, while this copy is selected, I'm going to duplicate that and make one more toe. And so I'll use the keyboard shortcut Command D. And now I'll get the ellipse tool one more time, keyboard shortcut L, click on the artboard, and this time I want a toe that is 0.75 by 0.25, and I'll press the enter key. And I'm going to rotate it. I'll get the rotate tool, keyboard shortcut R, and I'm going to hold down the option key and click on the left anchor, and I'm going to type in 20 degrees, and this time I'm not going to make a copy, I'll just say OK. And then I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and then I'm going to drag this down, and I'll try to place my anchor where these other toes have been rotated. And then I'm going to select all 4 of these pieces. I'll come to the properties panel, and I'm going to click on the Unite Pathfinder tool. Now let's get the Blob Brush Tool, keyboard shortcut Shift B, and we're going to increase the size of the blob using the right bracket key, and I'm going to just drag up a line and then get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, select both of these objects, come back to the properties panel and click on the Unite Pathfinder tool again, and then I'll get the Eyedropper tool, keyboard shortcut I, and change this to the CMYK color 0, 40, 88, 9. Now let's move our little foot down here on our turkey, and we're going to make a copy of this, and I'll hold down the shift and the option keys and just drag to the left, and then I'll come to the left toolbar, and the reflect tool is showing. If it wasn't showing, you'd see the rotate tool. These tools are nested together, and so I want the reflect tool, keyboard shortcut O, and I'll double click on this, and when I double click, it automatically did a vertical reflection. If horizontal had been checked, I would just come back over to vertical and say OK. Now I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and I'm going to use my left arrow key, and I'm going to arrow over, and then I'll select my right foot and arrow over here. Then I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to group them using the keyboard shortcut Command G, and this allows me to center these up more evenly. Now let's come to the layers panel, and we want the feet to be under the body and head part, and I think that looks pretty good. We may want to raise these up just a little bit. There we go. I think that's going to work great. The last thing to make is the shadow, and my shadow layer got filled up with this little sample, so we're going to create another layer, and I'm going to name it Shadow 2, and we're going to move it down underneath the feathers, and this is the bottom layer of our turkey. For the shadow, I'm going to get the Ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, and I'm just going to draw out an ellipse. And I'll get the Eyedropper tool, keyboard shortcut I, and I'm going to click on the CMYK color 00050. And this is already set to a transparency of 27%. And there we have our turkey all complete and ready to put on some little cute newsletter, or even use him to make a pattern brush, which I'll show you how to do in the next video. But for now, we're going to make him into a line drawing so that we can use him as a color sheet. So I'm going to select our turkey and move him over to the right, and then I'm going to hold down the Shift and the Option key, and I'll make an exact copy, and he'll be right in line with the first one. There are just a few things that need to be changed before I can convert this to a line drawing. Where I have used the Blob tool, that was the eyeballs and the eyebrows, I'm going to have to go in and add a stroke. And so I'll just put a 1-point stroke here. And then I'm going to go to the Layers panel. I think it'll be easier to select the hair that way. And I'll come up to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and then back to the Properties panel and add a stroke here of 1 point. Now the reason I'm doing that is when I have something that is just a fill, I'm going to change everything to a white fill, and I would just not even be able to see the hair. Now let's come to the Layers panel, and on the bib, I'll twirl down here, and I have text here, and I'm going to come to the Properties panel, and I'll add a stroke of 1 point to that as well. And the last thing is I need to add a stroke on the shadow, and I'm going to add 1 point, and I have to change the opacity to 100%. Now I'll select all of the objects in the turkey, and I'm going to come over to the Appearance panel and click on the fill icon, and we're going to give everything a white fill. If I didn't do white and just took the color completely away, this is sort of what our line drawing would look like, and it's hard to really even tell that's a turkey. So I'm going to just click on the artboard to deselect it, and you can see that we have pretty much an exact replica, only in black and white, and this would make a great little color sheet for boys and girls. Well, I hope you've enjoyed learning how to use some of the tools and placing the shapes together. There is no end to what you can do and what you can draw if you just begin to experiment. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to take this little turkey and make a pattern brush out of him. So be sure and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of these episodes as I continue to walk through using Adobe Illustrator with you. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.